What's up, guys? Welcome to the 40/40 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports history pod where hindsight is 40/40. Before we jump into today's episode, let's pay some bills and hear from our presenting sponsors. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 40/40 Vision podcast. I'm your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by a special guest, André Carlisle of the Diaspora United podcast. How's everything going today?
Doing well. How are you?
Great. Ready to dive in. So today's topic is the Women's World Cup. So we did a bit of a Women's World Cup preview and a pod on the state of women's soccer at the time. And, a lot has changed in the past month or so since we recorded that original podcast. So I wanted to let's start with some of the positives, because there's been a lot of negative things that have come out since the World Cup has wrapped up. But I want to hear kind of your overall thoughts on the World Cup. And obviously, I'm really interested in wanting to know what it was like being there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you starting here, because I'm so frustrated that all of the bullshit, I'm sorry if I can't cuss on here, but I'm sorry that all of that has overshadowed what has been great, but it's also important to elevate those things because they need to change. So it's I'm in two minds of it. So yeah. In terms of overall thoughts and what it was like being there. So I was only in New Zealand. I did not go to Australia, but I was in Wellington for about 9-10 days. I spent a couple days in Auckland as well and saw a couple games there. New Zealand did a great job. Everybody there was really hype about the World Cup being there, really hype about people being there for the World Cup. Just about every Uber ride I took, the drivers were telling me they went to games themselves, they had fun, all of that. So the vibe was cool. You could tell. And this seems like a low bar, right? But you could tell when you step in into an airport of one of these cities that are hosting games, you could tell that the Women's World Cup was there and is a big thing. It was marketed, it was advertised. Mm-hmm. These things have not always been a given in the women's game, even the World Cup. So you got the feel that this was a big event, and that was something that it needed to do. And I think it was even more so in Australia, where of course the whole hype from that national team being so good, and they had, to be honest, the bulk of the games. But yeah, I thought it was a tremendous event, and I had a lot of fun.
What games did you go to?
Oh, I think I went with 5 or 6. So I was at the U.S. national team Portugal game, which was hilarious and terrible. Yeah. I was at, Japan. I watched Japan 3 times. I saw them play 3 times, which was fun. I believe I saw South Africa and Italy. I saw Sweden and Argentina, I believe. And I can't even remember some of the ones. I should have cataloged them all, but it was rapid fire, because I caught the last bit of the group stages. So I went to a few of those games, and then there was a break, and then I went to a couple round of 16, and then I went to one quarterfinal match. So it was a lot, but it was super fun.
That's awesome. And it was all located kind of in the same general area. I know New Zealand's not that big, but was it in the same general area?
Yeah, so Wellington had a good chunk of games, which is why I decided to basically base myself there. So they had a good chunk of round of 16 games. They had a good chunk of they had a good chunk of group stage games. They also had a round of 16, and they had a quarterfinal. But Auckland, which is an hour flight away, they had probably more games than Wellington. So that's why I went up there to watch a couple, including Japan, Sweden, which broke my heart a little bit.
Yeah, that was a tough one. What do you think is the ultimate legacy of the World Cup? Just straight from a footballing perspective, not any of the larger social stuff, but just from the on the field product. What do you think the legacy was?
On the pitch, I think the legacy is given opportunity. Teams from all over the world can ball out. It doesn't really matter. I think, but I think that's a dangerous line. You also have to say level the playing field, resources, paying players, things like that, all these other things that come in and stories from federations not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But yeah, I think on the pitch, you saw there were some incredible performances from teams all over the world. I thought that's why I thought it was a little frustrating, and we'll get to it, but I was a little frustrated to see the like last, like the semifinal and the final just become like completely dominated by European teams, because that was not like the vibe of the World Cup early on. So eventually it whittled itself down to that. But I think that's the gap, right? The gap isn't talent, it's investment. So I think in terms of showcasing that, to me, that's the legacy of the World Cup, which was awesome to see.
Yeah, for sure. I think there was some questions coming in about, is 32 teams too many? And I think they proved, aside from a couple lopsided scorelines, which you do see in the men's World Cup too. It's not, just in the women's. So aside from that, you mentioned some of the, the lesser known teams or the smaller nations. They were able to make some noise and get into the knockout stage and things like that. So we think we know for sure 32 teams is definitely not too many. And it was a great, exciting tournament, a lot of upsets, especially early on in the group stage. Yeah. And speaking of upsets, what do you think was what were your biggest surprises from the group and knockout stage?
So I think the biggest one is probably Colombia beating Germany. That game was awesome. I didn't attend that game, but I was at a fan zone that had like a ton of Colombia fans in it. And so that was also just a fun vibe to watch the game. But I thought that game was so instructive of like talent level and like how even it is, because if you remember that game, Colombia scores first with that absolutely outrageous goal from Lindy Caicedo, who was just outrageous. And then Alex Pop equalizes, and it's late in the match. And you're thinking, okay, that's what a team's going to do. Germany with all this heritage, all these players that are well known, that's what they're going to do. So 1-1, pat Colombia on the back, hard fought. Colombia was like, nah, we want all the points, right? They went out and scored another goal after that. And it was dope. And the way they scored that goal was funny too, because they completely used their Germany's kind of very lax zonal marking scheme against them. And just like, we're like, okay, you're going to line up there. We're going to kick the ball here because nobody's here, and we're going to get a free header. And they ended up scoring it. So I thought that was awesome. There's a couple others I want to highlight, like Nigeria. I thought they had a really good World Cup. That game against England, they bossed England. They bossed them. And then they just ran out of gas for the penalty shootout. I wish they could have gotten a goal in open play, because they more than deserved one. Same as South Africa. South Africa did great against Netherlands. I think they had them really stressed out, especially the way that they play on the break. It wasn't just speed. It was like awareness, and their ability to stretch a defense was just great to see. Stretch it not just vertically, but also widthwise as well, like pull defenders apart, which was a key of their transition play. And then, you know what? I got to give a shout out to Haiti, because Haiti didn't make it out of the group. They were bottom of their group, but I think you have to dig in a little bit for context. Haiti, of course, was a team that had to qualify for the World Cup. So they were in those playoff qualifiers that happened like a month or two before the World Cup actually kicked off. They ended up getting in as one of the final teams. But listen, Haiti did not concede an open play goal until the 100th minute of the final match. It was just penalties that they let in. One was that very unfortunate handball when they really could have got a result against England. And then I can't remember the one against China, but I also know in that game, they also were denied a couple penalties themselves. So even though things didn't go their way, particularly refereeing decisions, I still got to say, that is a hell of a debut for Haiti. And the way that they played in every single one of their games, they're scary. They're scary.
That was a group that we highlighted as a potential group of death. It ended up going chalk, but I think it was definitely not as straightforward as you just looking at the table. You think, okay, Haiti, whatever. But no, just like you said, they were, stiff defensively, and they made the other teams earn it. That's for sure. So you mentioned Germany. There's a couple other big teams that didn't make it out of the group stage. I mean, the U.S., basically by the link of the post, made it out of the group stage. But maybe you're not too disappointed by the U.S. because I think you had some pretty low expectations coming in. But who were some of the big disappointments from, again, either the group or the knockout stage?
Yeah, I mean, I can throw the U.S. in there. I mean, I didn't. My expectations were low, but it's still frustrating to see a team that talented play that poorly. And I think there were a lot of reasons, and we'll get into that. But yeah, they're absolutely one of the biggest disappointments of the tournament, which is sad to say. Germany, of course, pretty big disappointment. The funny thing for Germany is that they almost came in a bit like, like the U.S. always gets the arrogant tag, right? From everybody, teams in Europe and everything. The Americans are arrogant. That's just like a blanket thing, and for the most part, it's not untrue. But that doesn't mean arrogance doesn't exist other places. And I think Germany was pretty arrogant in a lot of their games. They just felt like, you know what, we're going to keep doing what we do, and we're Germany and we're better. So they didn't do a ton to adjust. Like the Colombia game was fun and funny to look back on and analyze, because Colombia was just like, okay, you have these two hyper productive wingers. We're just going to double team them. And Germany was like, okay, we're going to keep giving them the ball and seeing what happens. And Colombia was just like, all right, like play this game if you want. The one time they changed something is when they won, is when they got into the box. And who was it? I believe it was Oberdorf that ran. Their defensive midfielder basically split the defense and ran right into the box. And that was like the one time they really tried something different in that game. So yeah, there was a little arrogance from Germany there, which I think cost them in the end and why they didn't get out of the group. And then my other disappointment, I hate to say it, but it was Brazil. I really thought that, do it for Marta thing would be like a massive rallying thing for that team. It would carry them sort of in the same way that like a home crowd could carry Australia. And apart from scoring, one of the prettiest goals you've ever seen, they just didn't get the results to get through. So it's not even like you can be like, oh, it just didn't happen for them, or another team caught fire. They just underperformed in the big moments when they really needed to get 3 points, and that was disappointing.
Yeah, those are two teams that you circled as potential, not quite dark horses, but teams that you thought could make a run. I mean, Germany, they got kind of spoiled by the South Korea performance at the end, and it was similar with Brazil. They were held out by Jamaica, but Jamaica made it out of the group stage, so it's not like they were on their way out. So it seemed like it was a deserved disappointment for Germany, and Brazil was, a little bit harsher because they were still in the mix. So I think we want to shift gears now to kind of the big story that has come out. I mean, we've gotten to this point. We haven't even talked about who won the World Cup because of, unfortunately, everything that has overshadowed the incredible victory by the Spanish women. So I think, as a casual fan myself, I did not know about any of this, insane drama that was going on leading up to the World Cup for the Spanish Federation and the players that essentially boycotted the team. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit of a background on, what happened there and how we got to this point?
Yeah, it's a long story. What I would say is I would encourage people to kind of like there are a few people who have outlets who have posted like timelines of events. And I think those are good things to go through just to see how long this has been going on. But yeah, it kind of started, and who knows where it actually began, because it does seem like even the coach before, Jorge Vilda, who's the current coach, still, apparently, I don't know when this is going out, but he's still the coach for now. He was, they got him out of there, and he was the coach predecessor. I think it was Corrada was his last name, and he was notorious for being is creating a toxic environment as well for the team. So this has been going on for a while, but what happened with this particular team and the lead up to this particular World Cup is about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago. It was called Lost 15. There are 15 players who said that they were not going to play for the Spanish national team. They wanted changes, and they wanted a lot of changes to the professionalism. They said they didn't feel like they were too ready for games, felt like the environment was toxic. There were reports of head coach Jorge Vilda not allowing them to close their hotel room doors until he checked, and things like that. Like, these are grown women being treated like, camp kids and they're like 6 years old. And so like there were reports of toxic environments like that, and they wanted changes. And the federation, we all now see how emboldened they are when they get pressure, said, absolutely not. We don't care. We're just not going to call you up. And then said, if you're going to get back in our good graces, you're going to need to write an apology letter. Like, they really took this to like treating them like children. And leading up to the World Cup, as it got more real, I believe 7 of the 15 said, okay, we're going to make ourselves available for selection. 3 of those 7 were actually selected, 4 weren't. 8 said, no, we're still not doing it. Some big names too. Mapi Leon is probably one of the best center backs in the world. She did not go to the World Cup. Patri Guiaro is one of the best defensive midfielders in the world. She did not go to the World Cup. So there were some big misses from Spain, which shows you also how the depth of their talent. Like there's like golden generation, then there's like what's after gold, diamond, platinum.
Yeah.
There's a massive, like, there's just loads of talent in that team. But so that happened. And then, of course, the whole thing with Jenny Hermoso happened, where he forcibly kissed her on stage. They had a terrible reaction to that. Everybody thought Rubiales, who's the president of the federation, was going to resign. And he's just like banging the table, yelling, "I will not resign," and then getting claps from Jorge Vilda and others in the federation. So, yeah, it's just been a tremendous mess, exacerbated by the continued brazenness of the federation. Really what they're doing right now is just kind of showing everybody the depth of the rot within the federation. So now people know that it's not just down to one guy. One guy may be very powerful and influential in this Rubiales dude, and he very much needs to go, but it's not getting fixed. It's not getting better with just him leaving. It's got to be more.
Yeah, and as of today, it's August 28th. We're recording. Jorge Vilda is still the coach. Rubiales is still, entrenched as the president of the federation.
Though he is apparently still suspended by FIFA for 90 days. So that did happen, which was FIFA did a thing, imagine.
Yeah. And they're threatening legal action against Hermoso. They are threatening to leave UEFA. So they're just going down this insane road of just doubling down on this behavior where, I think I could understand if they're denying something that happened behind closed doors because there's some plausible deniability. But this was literally in front of the world, right on stage.
Yeah.
I don't know how many millions, hundreds of millions of people watching, but it was just very brazen and blatant. And of course, they're doubling down on it. And I think what has been kind of encouraging, I understand a lot of people have not come out against this and made their statement, but I feel like a lot of people have. And I feel like this could become kind of a watershed moment for women in sports, not just women's soccer, but just women in sports. I mean, am I overstating the potential impact of this?
I don't think you're overstating it, but I think there's two ways to look at it, and I think both are valid. So the first way is that from apparel companies to federations to broadcasters, there is an underestimating of the women's football community that happens consistently. And we are seeing that has very serious consequences. You are seeing a lot of solidarity for Jenny across the world. It's not just Europe. Of course, it's in the US. The NWSL players wrote Contigo Jenny on the wristbands. There were signs in the stands. I was at the Spirit game yesterday. There were signs in the stands, multiple signs from the supporters groups, but also to just fans who showed up with Contigo Jenny written on them, which means "I'm with you, Jenny," is what it translates to. We saw in the Mexican League, Liga MX Femenil, same thing. Wristbands, banners, people saying, they're with Jenny. We saw the Norway and Finland, their federations put out statements in support of Jenny Hermoso. So we're seeing this everywhere. This is a full on thing. And I think that when you see that's the power of women's football. And I think it's important to note. The other thing, though, is that look what it took, right? That's the other thing that's frustrating. I talked about the 15, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Had they been listened to, Jenny wouldn't have had to be assaulted in front of a global television audience for everybody to be like, oh, that federation has some problems. And then everything else they've done after that, everybody's like, oh, there's a whole lot of problems here beyond just one person, which is kind of what they've been trying to say. But when they said that, it was more, even especially treated in the Spanish media as shocking breaking news, as opposed to actually doing the work to find out what was going on, talking to the players to figure out what has been happening. So I'm hopeful. Of course, the catalyst to all of this was them winning the World Cup. We have to say that they won the World Cup. But there are plenty of teams embattled with their federations that did not win a World Cup. Some did not get out of the group stages. Some lost in the round of 16. Every single round had a team, a national team that has some legitimate beef with their federation. Sometimes it's more than beef. It's you're mistreating us, right? So there's got to be more to it than that. And I don't know what to do about the fact that this stuff only happens when they win. Like the U.S. Women's
Mhm.
national team only got equal pay after they won the 2019 World Cup. And now it looks like Spain's federation, hopefully the end of this is it getting cleaned up. But if it does, that will be great. But it will also only have happened because they won the World Cup. And that can't be the only catalyst to making change in these federations.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if, not almost as if, it is if, that these women have to work twice as hard to enact some kind of change. It's not enough just to be, mistreated or whatever. You have to show that you're, quote unquote, worthy of the national attention or the global attention to, the cause that you're speaking out about. I mean, you mentioned some of the other teams, and we don't need to go down a long list, but what are some of the other challenges that we've seen, women's teams face in international football, whether it's funding or something far more sinister than that? But can you give us a couple examples?
Yeah, a lot of it is funding related. Like Nigeria, they've had a lot of issues being paid on time for their performances, being paid at all for their performances. There was a quote from Ife Anamano, who plays for Gotham FC in the NWSL. She said they were sharing beds during the World Cup. These are grown women sharing beds during the World Cup. That's probably not great for recovery as well. Like there's just very simple things that like make sure you get enough hotel rooms for the players. Traveling to games as well, it's very important. How are you traveling? Are you taking a bus versus a team that's going to fly? Like these are big things that can affect performance overall. Some of it is also sexual misconduct. There are a couple people, or one dude in particular, I forget his name, but in Haiti, who was already banished from the federation for being accused of, or not accused, but found to have sexually abused players. And he's apparently back with a position of power within the federation. And it's just shoulder shrug because people want him back. Thinking of Canada, Canada's having their own problems. Their federation says they don't have any money. The players want to know, where is the money? We won a gold medal at the World Cup, or not the World Cup, at the Olympics, which was supposed to be the 2021 Olympics, 2020 Olympics, but played in 2021. And then they didn't even get out of the group stage in this. So you just see like the impact. This is what I mean about winning and how it can sometimes, not always, and shouldn't be a catalyst at change. Them winning a gold medal didn't do anything for them, and they didn't have the resources to properly train. They were missing, I don't think they even had games before the World Cup. Like they may have played like a closed door game, perhaps when they were there, but they didn't have any games. And they certainly didn't have any games in Canada, which you could probably make money by scheduling a very successful, very talented team, right? So it's just stuff like that that's not happening. That's just no-brainer stuff on the men's side. And
Mm-hmm.
some of it's just downright gross stuff, like what I mentioned with Haiti and the abuse of players. So it's a range, and it's many teams, and it's teams and players that you think and you've heard of that are like household names if you follow the sport, but also some that aren't, and they all need attention, and it's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, and I believe I read about the Zambia head coach being accused of
Yeah,
some
that's
misconduct
another one.
or
Mm-hmm.
assault as well. So, yeah, I mean, and I think when you're talking about the knockout stages, when you're talking about late in these big tournaments, it's really these fine margins where you're talking about players not being treated correctly, players not, getting given the right resources. That's when these things matter, and that's when these things
Yeah.
really show up. And, I think we've seen that if you give the right funding and attention to women's sports, they'll thrive. And
Yeah.
it's just as simple as that. And if you choose to deny it, you can make up a billion excuses. Oh, people don't care. People don't want to watch, whatever it is. None of that matters. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
If you give it the right attention and the funding, people will come.
Yeah.
So let's talk about disappointments once again. The United States women's national team. Coming into the World Cup, you rated your confidence in them winning the whole thing at around a 4 or 5. Sounds like you were pretty spot on. So, what went wrong? Where did this team fall short?
Everything. And I don't say that in terms of like player performances, because I think most of the players did as good a job as they could do given the situations they were put in. But it's frustrating because it didn't have to be this way. Like, even though I've been frustrated with the way the team was playing, and leading in the lead up to the World Cup, even I didn't expect them to play as poorly as they did throughout the World Cup. So, looking at it, breaking it down, it's really kind of stems from leadership. So, the coaching staff, team selection, um, asking, not understanding your personnel, having them do certain things. There were just so many different things that were confusing about this World Cup that even I couldn't have predicted. Like, I knew that things weren't great, even at in the best case of scenarios. But like Ashley Sanchez, who has been Roosevelt's backup for probably 2 years now, um, 0 minutes at this World Cup.
Yeah.
Doesn't make
And
any
she's
sense.
a dynamic attacking player, right?
Absolutely. When you need goals, yeah, she's very good. In fact, when she came back from the World Cup, she subbed on for the Washington Spirit and scored within 40 seconds of her subbing onto the pitch. So, like, she's definitely in revenge mode, but also that's just what she does. And so, and Roosevelt was injured for the first couple matches, and then she picked up a yellow card, double yellow card, or yellow card suspensions, not double yellow card, but she missed a match as well. And Sanchez still, in the face of all of that, got 0 minutes. Alana Cook, who had been Naomi Garma's center back partner for the majority of Vlatko's tenure, he kind of rotated in Becky Sauerbrunn from time to time, but she was injured and didn't make the World Cup roster. You would expect, okay, Garma and Cook are going to go for it. Wrong. Alana Cook played 0 minutes as well during this World Cup. So he went with a brand new 11, had Julie Ertz playing center back, a position she hasn't played consistently since probably pre-pandemic. And it's just asking things like asking Alex Morgan to kind of drop and play more as a false nine. Not her game. She's 33. She's a target forward right now. That she's great at it. Let her do that. Give her the service to do that. But if you want a false nine, Sophia Smith plays the 9 for Portland Thorns. It's the kind of game that she plays. Why not move her central? When he would do that, sometimes late in games, you would see a fluidity there. And it never stuck. It was like something that never stuck in his mind that, like, oh, this actually makes things look better. To him, I guess it was just tired legs from defenders instead of actual cohesion from an attacking unit. Strange conclusion, in my opinion. Savannah DeMello, a great player. I love that she made the World Cup roster. She's deserved it. She's been playing well ever since her rookie year, which was a season ago. She was great. Picked up this season, been playing great as well. But her greatness has kind of been on display for a while, and he didn't bring her in until the send-off game, and then she started 2 back-to-back World Cup games. First of all, tremendous credit to her. This is not slighting her in any way because I think she certainly deserved to be on the squad, but he missed a chance to actually integrate her into the squad. She's basically a brand new player playing in midfield, kind of an important position, right? To have no cohesion, no familiarity with the rest of the team, her teammates. So not only getting her used to the system, but getting everybody used to her. And so there are just so many ways that the team was just set up not to succeed. And it was really frustrating to watch, even more frustrating than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned DeMello. She started the first 2 games, didn't play a minute after that. Alyssa Thompson did not play anything. I think she played maybe 1 or 2 minutes in one of the matches.
She had a handful of them, maybe like 11, I think, including stoppage. But yeah.
And then Sanchez, you mentioned, is this supposedly dynamic scorer player that they just for some reason couldn't find room for. And I think you mentioned this going in as like maybe your primary concern was style not fitting personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, how do you think that bore out? I mean, obviously we saw the results, but what was the most kind of egregious example of this?
Oh, the midfield, probably. The way the midfield played and just some of the players, Alex Morgan was not in great form. She don't believe she scored at the World Cup. She missed a penalty. And, it's like, if that's happening, I understand she's Alex Morgan, but you need goals, you need results, you need to figure out something to do. Midfield, it was well written about, but these issues were there well before they popped up at the World Cup. I believe many people called it, prayer circle midfield, or, I forget what a couple of the others were called, but yeah, just like a big hole in midfield. And this is where Andy Sullivan, I think, bore the brunt of people's criticism because she'd been left alone on an island in midfield by design. Lindsay Horan and Roosevelt or whoever else was playing the 10 were told to go forward, which that's great for a 10. But your number 8 in that midfield 3 needs to be truly box to box. But pushing them up high just to create overloads doesn't really help when you don't have anybody to like carry the ball or distribute the ball to the attack. Like that's why midfielders doing late arriving runs. It's late arriving. It's not early arriving, right? You don't want to be up there too early because then you're leaving a big gap. And when the ball is turned over, now there's no resistance except for one person playing in midfield, and then they're right at the back line. So Andy Sullivan got a lot of crap for that, but we saw the same thing in just about every single World Cup game except the game against Sweden, which we saw or heard Lindsay Horan tell Tobin Heath and Kristen Press. They started their own show during the World Cup called the Recap Show. And she was a guest after the World Cup. And she said that game, they basically decided to do their own thing. And it worked. And so the coaching staff was like, keep doing it. The thing they figured out was like, have a midfield, right? Like be able to pass to one another in midfield and then distribute the ball to the attack. So that's what they did. And that's also helped them defensively. Now you had more resistance if a team turns the ball over, or you're just closer to be able to counter press, do things like that. So it seems basic. It's frustrating the team had to like do that on their own, but that was their best performance of the World Cup. And it kind of speaks to how poorly they were set up in just about every single way leading into this World Cup, and certainly in this World Cup where some very strange decisions were made.
Yeah, there was a lot of second guessing, and I think it was well deserved considering the results. I mean, they seemed solid defensively. They gave up one goal in 4 games, and that was I think early in the Netherlands game. 220-minute matches, or sorry, 120-minute match, and they didn't concede a goal against a really good Sweden team. So I guess that part of it worked out, which I guess is good for, maybe not a tournament style type setup. But yeah, it seemed like there was no cohesion. There was no goal scoring. They also only scored, aside from the Vietnam match, which was its own story, they only scored 1 goal after that. Mm-hmm. And I believe it wasn't even from open play. It was a header from Lindsay Horan against the Netherlands. So there was all this attacking power, attacking backup, on the bench, and it just for whatever reason was not being utilized. So do you think there was maybe an over-reliance on some of the old guard? I know a lot of people kind of shook their heads at Megan Rapinoe making that not quite a cameo appearance, but for extra time against Sweden. And I know Alex Morgan took a lot of stick for her performance. So was it an over-reliance on that generation?
I mean, I think it was many things, but yeah, that's one of them. Even talking to Vlatko, in pressers ahead of the World Cup, asking him, why is Megan Rapinoe going? The way he would answer the question was, she's important for like locker room stuff, we have a very young team. She's going to help them like figure out like what you need to do at a World Cup to play your best on game days. Like, how do you need to like treat your body? When do you need to rest? When do you need to pick things back up? Like, how do you need to do things, especially given that they were going to be so far away from any time zone that was familiar to them, right? So that's what we heard. And it was just like, okay, I could see that. All right. Like, it is quite a bit of turnover. And in fact, had there not been injuries, there probably would have been even more turnover on the squad. But then Megan Rapinoe played a lot more minutes. Certainly played a hell of a lot more minutes than Ashley Sanchez, right? Played a lot more minutes than Alyssa Thompson. And she wasn't really productive. And kind of the same thing with Alex Morgan, not really productive. And it was strange to see, especially from those 2 players. But it was also like, with one of them, you told us that's not what you brought her for. Right. So I don't really understand why going to her in those moments was the thing to do, other than panic or a reliance on saying, the history of a player as opposed to current form. So I think there were elements of that, but more than anything, it's just like you mentioned the talent on the bench. There was also plenty of talent in every starting 11, even though I would have made a couple changes myself just to many of the starting 11s that we went out with. But there was still enough to be able to have if you had a cohesive plan and if you had a way for players to know what they were doing with one another on the pitch, this could have been a very different tournament. And I think you look at Spain and England, look at some of the ways that they played, and even Spain getting torn apart by Japan. I think this was, for the U.S., a competent U.S. team with a competent coach and a decent structure. It could have been a winnable World Cup. And that's what's so frustrating. We had the talent to win. And instead, here we are.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that you pointed out in the preview pod was the gap or the battle between the two generations. And there's this big gap. There's just all these, young stars that are coming up. There's the older generation. I mean, I think when it came down to it, when, his back was against the wall, he just went to old reliable, and that's Megan Rapinoe. And, once upon a time, she's one of the best players, if not the best player in the world. And that's just not who she is anymore. And that's totally fine. And I think the irony is, like, despite all this, they lost on, one of the most absurd penalties I've ever seen, where it was quite literally like a fingernail's width, maybe even less than that, over the line. So, it's fine margins again in the knockout stages. And if you do have a better coach, you have someone that's maybe a little better at squad rotation, maybe willing to take more risks with younger players, then I think, like you said, it was a winnable World Cup for this team. And of course, with all the talent they have. So right now, I think they don't have a coach as of now. So what's next for this team? I mean, do you have any candidates that they're looking at, or that you think they should be looking at? And what's next for this, new generation of stars that are coming up?
So what's next for the team? Interim coach Twyla Kilgore, I believe, is taking over for the friendlies that you'll see in September and probably October. Kate Margraf was the general manager for the U.S. Women's National Team. She went along with Vlatko. I believe they both, quote unquote, resigned. Whatever. I think U.S. Soccer is also doing some internal, like, organizational shakeups, because Matt Crocker is not, like, he led the coaching search for the men's team, and he's doing the same thing for the women's team. So it seems like they're probably not looking to fill that GM role on the women's side. So structurally, we'll have to see what happens there. But in terms of coaches that I know they're looking at, don't know. Have no idea. I would assume that there are a few names on the list. Like, I know that there were reports that they've tried to contact the England's FA for Serena Wiegman, who they just laughed and were like, haha, no, which you would get. She's a very good coach, even though I think she made some mistakes in the final that probably cost them a World Cup. But she'd been great before that, and they won the Euros. Laura Harvey was in, like, final round contention along with Vlatko when it came to finding Jill Ellis's successor. She's currently the coach at OL Reign. So there's a possibility that she's still interested in that. She did coach the under 20s for a spell, and that team had Naomi Girma, Sophia Smith. So she's got a lot of familiarity with a lot of the younger players who are meant to be like the rocks of the new generation. Those are a couple names, but also, I mean, I've heard rumors of all kinds of names, like Ikeda, the coach from Japan. First of all, language barrier, have no idea if he speaks English, and also don't know if he'd be willing to leave that federation, because he was also the youth national team coach there, got promoted to the senior team, and that's when that team started playing better, because they have a young generation of talent. I believe the majority of their players who were standouts were under 25. So they have a very good young generation that he's probably going to continue to want to build with. So yeah, this is going to be interesting to see where they go, see what they want. I know I've read the jokes out there that it's going to be Greg Berhalter again, because Matt Crocker's leading the search again. But I'm curious to see who it's going to be. Tony Gustafsson as well. He was I believe on the staff with Jill Ellis. He was the coach of Australia. He's an interesting prospect. I like him and his personality, but with Australia, they really look to play on the counter, and that's not something that this team should be doing, the U.S. team. So it's going to be interesting to see what they prioritize.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be the most, if not the most, highly coveted jobs. Sure. But yeah, we might just end up with Vlatko back again.
Absolutely not.
if recent,
in fact, I'm waiting for a club team to hire him, just so that's like, no, we're not doing that again.
So you're worried it's a real possibility. Okay.
I don't think it is. I mean,
Yeah.
that seems like you round of 16, earliest exit ever for the U.S. team in a World Cup. I don't think you survive that and get to
Yeah.
come back. So yeah,
No,
I
for
don't.
sure.
Yeah.
Totally joking. Totally joking. But before, we talked a little bit about some of your predictions with the group of death. The one that you pointed out, which was right on point, was Group B, and that was Australia, Canada, Nigeria, and the Republic of Ireland. And I think if it went chalk, it would have been Canada, probably Australia, and then maybe Nigeria finishing bottom. But it ended up being Nigeria advancing out of that group. So, any thoughts on that prediction? Because you got that one right.
No, I mean it was just it's tough with I thinking about where Canada was at with their federation and their preparation for the World Cup. That also impacted kind of what I thought. The wild card for me was Republic of Ireland because they have a very talented team, but they also have a coach who has some question marks in her past. So not that I've heard anything from that Ireland camp, but I also don't think she's a fantastic tactician type of coach. So I wish they would have because they almost played a game that they didn't have to play. It's just like Ireland. Everybody expects that team to play rough, and when you have like Katie McCabe as one of your star players, you're going to that's kind of her brand. But I also thought that they had enough talent and skill to play. And we saw that in some games when they would go down a goal, then they open things up and you're like, where the hell did this come from? And I think it was just that battle. So I think then if they find another coach who actually can enhance their on-ball qualities and let them play the way that they can, because a lot of those players are quite good and can play a different style than just, being completely defensive and trying to hit on the counter. Would have been interesting. But yeah, that was really, those two things were really why I was like, ooh, this one might not go the way people think.
Yeah, that was definitely didn't go chalk. We'll say that. And then there was a couple teams you mentioned. We already talked about Brazil, Germany, and Canada being some of the disappointments, not advancing. You did call out Japan as a team to watch. I think they were outside of the maybe top 6 or 7 in terms of the favorites, and they made a nice little run. What did you make of their performance at the World Cup?
Best team of the World Cup for me. Their performances were absolutely incredible. The way that they have a style that fits their talent, and they have a lot of very young and very talented players. And so the one time they messed up was that first half against Sweden, and they kind of went to a different style, put a different player on that left side when they had June Endo over there, who provided not only some pretty strong and aggressive defensive capabilities, but more than that, an outlet. And there were just a lot of times where they replaced Rahina Sagita, who is a great player. She plays for Portland Thorns. She's very, very good, but it's just different. The type of cohesion that team had and they built together, it's hard to just plug different players in. And from all accounts, Endo was healthy. He just wanted a different profile over there, and it didn't work out. So I'm frustrated about that. But yeah, ultimately, the way that they played, the way that they manipulated defenses, the way that they were able to stretch defenses both vertically and horizontally was very fun. And they would do it quickly too, get the ball in the space behind, and then you have somebody else, then the defense kind of shifts to cover over, and then you have somebody making a vertical run in between a gap, and then you send the ball across and you find them. They tore Spain apart doing that multiple times, and they didn't even need to touch the ball a lot. We'll talk about that game later. But yeah, they were the most fun side to watch in the entire World Cup.
Yeah, like you said, they tore Spain up, and they played a really aesthetically pleasing brand of soccer, I think. And it's when you beat the champion 4-0, then you're doing something right.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit, go into a little bit of a lightning round. So I'm going to ask you a question. Just, first thing comes to mind. What was your favorite game from the group stage?
Easy. Japan, Spain. For the reasons we just talked about. 4-0, and you can look at the possession stats on that one. I think they had maybe 4 touches in the box in the first half. And I think 2 or 3 of them were goals. They just completely said, okay, fine. You can do your 1,000 passes, do whatever you do, Spain. When we do take the ball off of you, we know exactly how to counter and the spaces we're going to exploit. And they pulled it off expertly. It was, I was at that game live. funniest game I've ever been to. I was in the stands having like a blast. That game was hilarious.
Yeah, it was a great watch. I think for me, France, Brazil, maybe just for the level of soccer being played, and then South Africa, Italy for the drama.
Yeah.
Favorite game of the knockout stage?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Oh, especially because so many of them didn't go the way I wanted them to go. Oh, you know what? I think it's Australia, France. Just because that game was wild. That penalty kick shootout is legendary. I believe it was 20 penalties taken between both teams.
It was insane. I've never seen anything like that before.
It was incredible. And the quality of many of the penalties, like, yeah, you had a couple that were bad. Like even Sam Kerr had a pretty bad one, but she scored it. And I was scared to death. I was like, please don't miss a penalty in the Australia World Cup. Please don't do that. But like, yeah. And then there was some incredible goalkeeping as well. I'm thinking of Mackenzie Arnold when she saved one. Then they had the VAR review and said that she had, came off her line too early. She had to go again, and she saved it again. I think into the French keeper as well, which was substituted on before, specifically for the penalty kick shootout. She was incredible throughout the entire shootout and had one of the best saves I've ever seen in a shootout, where she was like diving, reached behind her, and just like palm of stone, just smacked the ball straight down. I don't know how she had enough power in her arm after diving for the ball midair to be able to stop a shot that was struck with quite a bit of venom. Like that was fun. That penalty shootout was, I hate them, but that was a fun one.
That may have been the game of the tournament. I mean, anytime you get the keepers involved in penalties, it's always well, like the late stage keepers, when you're talking about you come through the whole team. I mean, we could talk about Alyssa Nair and her kind of legendary moment that unfortunately was overshadowed, but that was really cool to see that. As a keeper myself, that was awesome to watch. Favorite goal? I know this is a tough one. There's a ton of goals scored, but favorite goal? You can give me 2 if you want.
Can I give you 4?
Please do. Sure.
Linda Caicedo versus Germany. Just watch the way she sets up 2 German defenders. Go back and watch that goal. It's incredible. Marta Cox's for Panama. Her free kick against France. Outrageous. Had to be close to 40
From
yards
like the
out.
halfway line almost.
Yeah, just absolutely punished the ball, and it was pinpoint, top corner. It was incredible. Sam Kerr's banger versus England. The sound in the stadium from that shot hitting the back of the net, it was a banger as well. Plus, she torments Mary Earps in the league and did it again on the World Cup stage. Made me very happy as a Chelsea fan. And then Brazil versus Panama. That goal that they scored that was like just perfect epitome of Brazilian play, Brazilian flair. I think there were 2 back heels in the buildup of that play. It was like Tamirez to Debinha to Adriana, back to Debinha to Ari Borges, who was already had 2 goals and could have just tapped it in for a hat trick. She flicked the ball backwards to Bia Zanerato for a goal. It was the best move, the best sequence of play. With all due respect to Japan, that was the best sequence of play that we saw all tournament.
Yeah, that was easily the best team goal. I mean, I'm a fan of the individual goals, like the golazos that make you kind of want to like get up and fight somebody because they were so crazy.
Right.
Lauren James against Denmark, that was incredible.
Yes.
But
Which
Sam
one?
Kerr, the one against Denmark, I think that was top of the box. Not quite upper 90, but it was just a perfectly placed shot. And it's a shame that she didn't get to play for those 2 games. But and then the Sam Kerr one, you mentioned the noise and just the buildup, the anticipation of her making that run, and just the moment. I think, obviously they end up losing that game, and she doesn't have the best game. She probably could have had 4 goals that night, but that goal was just incredible. It's everything like encapsulated about her and the desire and the skill and everything that she has. Just an incredible moment. Favorite player to watch or players? You can give me 4.
All right, good. It's really hard to answer these with just one player. Okay, so Mayra Ramirez, striker for Colombia. She was left on an island a lot, intentionally by some of their game planning, but like she was so good. So good. She was so difficult to mark. She stressed the hell out of Germany's center backs, which was funny. But she's strong. She's quick, with acceleration. Very good with the ball too. Both feet, just be able to evade defenders coming towards her. So it's just kind of like, in terms of liking to watch her, like having a good time. It was just like she she could like toy with defenders, and that's what made it fun. Like they're panicking because she has the ball in a dangerous position. They want to win it back, and she's strong enough and skilled enough with her feet to just kind of like one rondo, just keep the ball away from them, which is just very, 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 very fun to watch. Um, and she has a powerful shot. I'm mad she didn't score a goal because she had like a foot cannon. If one of those would have hit the back of the net, it might have been a goal tournament just because of the velocity. Um, June Endo, mentioned her with Japan, exceptional player, super tricky on the ball, super silky. Had one of the assists, I think the assist of the tournament. It was just that left footer that curled around multiple defenders and right into the path of, I believe it was Miyazawa, who ended up winning the Golden Boot. Outstanding on that left side. Such a good player. Timmy Kadlana for South Africa, just a terror. Just an absolute terror in transition. And then also just being able to like press hard as well. But every time she got the ball, like especially thinking of that Netherlands game, they were terrified. And honestly, South Africa could have scored many goals, a couple of goals from some of the positions that she put them in. She's very, very good. And my last one, I'm going to go with Teresa Aguilera, who was the defensive midfielder for Spain. Outrageous. She had an outrageous tournament. I mean, just composed, control the middle of the pitch. I mean, every single, like all of her stats just jump off the page. Like she was definitely like player of the tournament caliber from that position too. That's hard to do, but she was excellent in this World Cup.
I'm going to pick one. Is Selma, I believe it's Paralelo.
Paralelo, yes, yes. That's a good one.
I mean, she's a great story. Came from, used to be a track and field star. Now she's, she went from kind of an impact sub, scored some game-winning goals, and then obviously, you know, she started in the final, I believe. So she was just a delight to watch. I think she's only, 19, 20 years old?
Yep, only 19. And this was, I think, her third World Cup because she played in the under-20s and under-17s as well.
Yeah.
Scored in those two.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because the breakout star for me, I don't want to steal the thunder, was Caicedo. And she had the same kind of story where I think she's only 17, which is insane to think about. But who's your breakout star, again, or stars of the tournament?
Yeah, so Caicedo jumped on people's radar, especially like club level a little while. That's why she's at Real Madrid right now. So like they absolutely were like, okay. So yeah, she's 18 right now, but still, that's a great one. She's incredible. Esme Brooks, she kind of was playing wing back for Netherlands. Outrageous.
I don't know if that's 3 bangers from.
Yeah, she had a carbon copy one too, where she was like, "That felt real good. I'm going to do it again." But yeah, like she was so good at that wing back role. So I think that just lets you know if you need her to play as like a kind of up and down the flank winger, she can do that. If you're going to have her play as a wing back, you can. Might be a terrible job to have her just as a waste, just to have her as a pure fullback, unless you're really going to dominate possession. But yeah, she already signed to Barcelona, so we'll see where they put her. But yeah, she was quite good. Hinata Miyazawa, I think the Golden Boot winner, her runs from midfield were great, or just like through the central defense. It's funny because if you look at her shot map, basically every single goal that she scored was right around the penalty area. It was just like she was so good at being able to time those runs to where she just like she does all the work before she has to even like contact the ball. Yeah. So super smart player, super fun to watch, especially the way that Japan would move the ball. And all of a sudden you see a pass go forward and you're like, who was that to? And then there she is breaking the line. You're like, oh, that's just sweet. It looks so good. And then Kira Cooney-Cross for Australia. She was great in midfield. I believe she's only 21 as well. So like a really, really good player, composed on the ball. Passing range is outrageous. Like she's going to be one like on the national stage. I mean, clearly is already on an international stage, but like as she continues to grow, she's going to be a hell of a problem. And so I'm really excited to see her from here on out. And she there's a rumor that she might end up at Chelsea, which of course I fully endorse. Yeah,
fingers crossed. So I think one of the constant messages we see after these World Cups, where the interest in women's football is at its peak, is that, you know, it doesn't end when the World Cup ends. It continues on. I know you're, a big fan of women's soccer, and you're a champion for, women's football and women's sports in general. So where can folks follow you? Where can they see more women's soccer? Where can they see some of these stars that we've discussed shine for their clubs?
Yeah, so I'll get me out of the way. You can just Diaspora United podcast is where you want to go, or you can just go follow but you can also follow my Twitter if you want, because I post highlights. I try to post as many as I see, but that's 838_Carlisle. As far as the leagues, I think you've got the NWSL, which is heading towards like a massive playoff push, and then the playoffs. This is a great time to pay attention to the NWSL. So Paramount Plus, if you want to get them, there'll be a few games on CBS Sports Network as well. Definitely want to watch those, because just about every game is going to have playoff implications. If you look at the table right now, just Google NWSL and look at the standings. It's tight. It is tight. Even though 6 teams in a 12-team league make the playoffs, it's tight, and it's going to be fun. I think you'll see a lot of the leagues in Europe start to kick off as well. They're on a little bit of a break because of the World Cup, but the WSL league, that's the English league. Absolutely. If you want to see Sam Kerr play for Chelsea, she plays for Chelsea. I think a lot of the players as well that you saw so does Lauren James. She plays for Chelsea as well. But Arsenal has a great team as well in that league. Manchester City has a lot of talent, but their coach sucks. I also think looking at the Women's Champions League, when that comes back around, absolutely. That's definitely one to pay attention to. Liga F, which is in Spain, D1 Arkema, which is the France league. Pay attention to all of these. I think ATA football is a good place to go to start to watch some of these games. And then Liga MX Femenil. They're in season right now. Believe they just started their season. They're probably a handful of games in. But Marta Cox, we talked about her free kick banger. She went back to the league in Mexico, and about a day or two after doing that, did the same thing. Scored another one. Banger. So there's plenty of players to watch in Liga MX Femenil. And also that Mexico team, when they get it together and find the right coach and system, they're going to be a problem. There's a ton of talent in Mexico, and a lot of it plays in that league. So, there's plenty of reason to check that league out.
Yeah, we live in a golden age of access to football. I mean, you mentioned Paramount Plus. I think the WSL is on ESPN Plus. A lot of teams will show their own games on YouTube live, so not replays. I watched plenty of Chelsea women's games on YouTube. I think that Women's Champions League is on YouTube as well. So if you want,
but I don't know if the zone is gonna start charging people soon. So, but if they don't, then take advantage of it certainly this year, because it's not gonna be free forever.
For sure, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah, correct.
It's always good. Yes. And there's always the other unmentionable sites and stuff that you can find these games on. We don't need to talk about those, but they're there. Right. So if you want it, it's out there. Yes. So thanks, Andre. We really appreciate it. Thank you again for your expertise, for your tactical analysis, for your passion, all that. Best of luck to you and your endeavors and everything that you're working on. As far as us, you can find us on basically all the major podcasting platforms. Make sure to leave us a review. Make sure to follow us on all the major social media networks. We're also coming out with a newsletter pretty soon, which we'll be announcing this week. So make sure you subscribe to that as well. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.